I was born and raised in the quiet heart of Missouri, in a town where the scent of fresh-baked bread drifted from the local bakery every morning, and the church bells rang faithfully every Sunday. It was a place where everyone knew your name, where greetings weren't just exchanged out of politeness but with genuine warmth. Life was predictable, steady, and in many ways comforting. My parents, humble and hardworking, built their lives around faith, integrity, and the small joys of everyday existence. My mother, a librarian, had an undying love for books, her fingers always brushing against the spines of well-worn pages. Her voice soft as she read bedtime stories to me and my siblings. My father, a carpenter, carried the scent of sawdust on his clothes and always had a way of turning something broken into something beautiful. He was a man of quiet wisdom, a firm handshake, and a heart that seemed too big for his own chest. Faith was always present in our home, but it was woven into the fabric of tradition rather than personal connection. Sunday mornings were reserved for church, where we'd sit in the same wooden pew, singing hymns that felt more like obligations than expressions of devotion. At mealtime, we bowed our heads in prayer, but I often caught myself mumbling the words rather than feeling them. God to me was like a distant relative, acknowledged, respected, but not intimately known. As a child, my world was small but filled with wonder. I found magic in the simplest things: the way the morning sun filtered through the lace curtains in our kitchen, the crisp autumn leaves crunching beneath my feet, the rhythmic hum of cicadas on warm summer nights. I spent countless afternoons lying on the grassy fields behind our house, gazing up at the endless sky, dreaming of places far beyond the horizon. But childhood slipped away quietly, as it always does, replaced by the steady weight of responsibility. By my early 30s, I had built what most would consider a fulfilling life. I was a nurse at St. Luke's Medical Center, a hospital in the heart of Kansas City, where my days were filled with the comforting monotony of patient charts, 4 drips, and late-night shifts. I married a man who had once made my heart race with just a smile, and together we had 2 beautiful children, Sarah and Ethan. Our home was a small but cozy 2-story house with a white picket fence, the kind of house that seemed to whisper stories of warmth and belonging. Our days followed a familiar rhythm: school drop-offs and pickups, endless loads of laundry, quick dinners eaten between tired conversations, and evenings spent side by side on the couch, scrolling through our phones in comfortable silence. It was a good life, a life I knew I should be grateful for. And yet, beneath the carefully constructed normalcy, there was something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It wasn't dissatisfaction either. It was a quiet restlessness, an ache that sat in the hollow of my chest, stirring in the quiet moments between responsibilities. It was the feeling of standing at the edge of something vast, staring into the unknown, unable to take that first step forward. I found myself longing for something I couldn't define. Late at night, when the house was still and the world outside had gone quiet, I would sit by the window, staring out at the city lights in the distance, wondering if this was all there was. Faith, which had once been a whisper in the background of my life, had faded to near silence. The Bible on my nightstand gathered dust. My prayers became little more than murmurs uttered out of habit rather than belief. God, if he was there at all, felt impossibly far away, like a childhood story I had outgrown but never truly understood. Then, on one seemingly ordinary evening, everything changed. Pushpin, before we continue, I want to personally invite you to be part of our community. If this story has resonated with you so far, if you've ever felt that quiet longing for something more, then this journey is for you. Click subscribe and join us as we explore these powerful experiences together. And don't forget to like this video. Your support helps us share these incredible stories with more people who might need to hear them. Now let's continue. It was a late summer evening when the first unraveling thread of my life was pulled. The kind of evening where the heat of the day still clung stubbornly to the air, but the sky had begun its slow descent into twilight, painted in streaks of amber and indigo. I had just finished an exhausting shift at the hospital, 14 hours on my feet, running from room to room, tending to patients whose pain I could ease but never truly erase. The weight of the day pressed down on me, seeping into my bones as I walked through the fluorescent-lit aisles of a small grocery store. My mind was elsewhere, replaying the exhausted faces of the people I had cared for that day. The elderly man with the deep-set eyes who had held my hand, whispering stories of his late wife. The young mother, clutching her newborn with trembling fingers, fear etched into every line of her face. The man who had come in alone, only to leave in a body bag. I sighed, shaking my head free of the memories, and grabbed the ingredients for my daughter's favorite pasta dish. Something simple, something to brighten her mood after a tough week at school. By the time I stepped back outside, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and the city lights flickered to life, casting long, glowing streaks across the pavement. The air smelled of pavement still warm from the day's heat, mingled with the faint scent of gasoline from the nearby station. As I drove out of the parking lot, the road stretched ahead of me, quiet and familiar. My hands rested loosely on the wheel, and for the first time all day, I allowed myself to exhale. But the peace was short-lived. A creeping sensation prickled at the back of my neck, an unshakable feeling that something wasn't right. My heart quickened for no reason I could name. I glanced in the rearview mirror and froze. Headlights, weaving erratically behind me, closing the distance far too quickly. The car was moving too fast, swerving dangerously across the lanes, its driver reckless or, worse, completely out of control. Panic surged through me. I tightened my grip on the wheel, my pulse hammering in my ears. The vehicle shot forward like a bullet, closing the distance in seconds. My instincts screamed, move. I swerved into the next lane, but it was too late. The impact came with a deafening crash, a metallic screech that tore through the night. The world spun. The road vanished, replaced by a kaleidoscope of blurred lights and shadows. My body jerked violently against the seatbelt, the force knocking the breath from my lungs. A second impact, a brutal bone-jarring collision against the guardrail, sent my car flipping. Time slowed. The ceiling became the floor. Shattered glass rained around me like falling stars. My head struck something hard, and an explosion of white-hot pain erupted behind my eyes. And then, silence. The world went still, save for the distant wail of sirens cutting through the night. I was trapped, my body pinned by the wreckage, every nerve screaming in agony. The scent of burning rubber and gasoline filled my lungs, thick and suffocating. Blood, warm, metallic, coated my lips. My vision wavered, the edges of my consciousness flickering in and out like a failing light bulb. Somewhere voices shouted, but they felt miles away, as if I were hearing them from the bottom of the ocean. In that moment, with pain clawing at my ribs and darkness creeping into the corners of my vision, one thought cut through the haze with brutal clarity. My children, Sarah and Ethan, their laughter, their small hands reaching for mine. The way they curled up beside me on the couch, safe and warm, their breath steady as they slept. I couldn't leave them. I wouldn't leave them. But the darkness didn't care about my resolve. It pulled at me, relentless and unyielding, wrapping around my limbs like a tide dragging me under. My eyelids grew impossibly heavy. My body, battered and broken, refused to move. And as the world around me dimmed, a strange sensation washed over me. Something I couldn't explain, something more profound than pain, more powerful than fear. Warmth. Soft at first, like the gentle flicker of a candle's flame. Then stronger, like sunlight piercing through the thickest storm. I tried to cling to it, to resist the nothingness closing in around me. But the last thing I saw before my vision gave way entirely was the faint outline of my own hands resting limply on the shattered remains of my steering wheel. And there, illuminated by the flickering headlights of my crumpled car, the faint imprint of a half-moon, glowing on both my palms. The darkness was absolute. Not the kind that simply dims the world like the absence of light in a room. This was something deeper, something that swallowed everything whole. A vast, endless void where sound, time, and even thought seemed to dissolve into nothingness. Yet I was still aware. I couldn't feel my body, couldn't hear the distant wail of sirens or the muffled voices that had once surrounded me. But I was conscious in a way I had never been before, as if my very essence had been peeled away from the weight of flesh and bone. First, there was only silence. A silence so profound, so complete, that it pressed against me like an invisible force. I drifted, weightless, caught between a world I could no longer touch and a destination I did not yet understand. Then, from somewhere far beyond the darkness, I sensed it. Presence. It was subtle at first, like the faintest whisper carried on the wind, but it grew stronger, enveloping me in a warmth that defied the void. It wasn't heat, not in the physical sense, but something deeper, something that reached into the very fabric of my being, wrapping around me like a long-lost embrace. And then, in the distance, a pinprick of light appeared. It was impossibly small, barely more than a flicker against the endless expanse of black. Yet even in its faintness it was mesmerizing. It pulsed, rhythmic and steady, as if it had been waiting for me all along. I felt myself drawn toward it, not by force but by something more profound. A pull that resonated deep within me, an unspoken invitation whispering through every part of my existence. The light grew, expanding as I drifted closer. With each passing moment, the darkness that had surrounded me seemed to recede, retreating like a tide at dawn. And then, just as I reached the edge of the glow, the world changed. I was no longer floating in an empty void. Beneath me, the ground shimmered like polished glass, smooth and endless, reflecting the radiance that surrounded it. Above me, the sky stretched in every direction, painted in colors no human eye had ever witnessed. Golden hues blending into silver, deep blues bleeding into a light so pure it seemed to vibrate with life itself. I turned slowly, taking in the impossible beauty that unfolded before me. Everything around me felt alive, the air itself pulsing with a quiet, unseen energy, as if every molecule was woven with meaning and purpose. And then I saw them. Figures moved in the distance, their silhouettes bathed in light. They weren't walking in the way we do on Earth. They glided, weightless, their forms both solid and ethereal, as if they were made of the very light that surrounded them. There was no fear in me, no confusion. Leah. I took a tentative step forward. The moment my foot touched the radiant surface beneath me, a warmth spread through me, a sensation that was both familiar and foreign, as if every doubt, every burden I had carried my entire life, had been lifted in an instant. And then I noticed my hands. I raised them slowly, turning them over in front of me. And there, glowing softly against my skin, were 2 half-moon imprints. They pulsed with the same gentle light that surrounded me, their edges precise, their meaning unknown but undeniably significant. I traced them with my fingertips, a strange sense of recognition stirring in my chest. These marks, they weren't random. They were meant to be here. A sudden shift in the air made me lift my gaze. From within the light, a figure began to emerge. At first, it was nothing more than a silhouette, its form blurred and indistinct. But as it drew closer, its presence filled the space around it, and my breath, if I was even still breathing, caught in my throat. It was a man. But not just any man. He radiated something beyond words, beyond anything I had ever felt in my life. Love, pure, overwhelming, all-consuming love, poured from him in waves so strong they nearly brought me to my knees. His eyes met mine, deep and knowing, and in that instant I felt fully seen. Every moment of my life, every thought I had ever had, every fear I had ever buried, all of it was laid bare before him. And yet, there was no judgment in his gaze. Only compassion, only understanding, only a love so profound it left me breathless. He lifted his hands, and as he did, I saw them. The same half-moon imprints, glowing on both of his palms. Time stood still. I opened my mouth, desperate to speak, to ask the questions that burned within me. But before I could utter a single word, the light surrounding him flared, growing impossibly bright. And in that brilliance, everything I had ever known, everything I had ever believed, was about to change. The light swelled around me, not blinding but all-encompassing, a radiance so pure, so alive, that it felt as though I were being woven into its very essence. It wasn't harsh like the midday sun or artificial like the glow of a hospital room's fluorescent lights. It was warm, embracing, and filled with something I could only describe as knowing. The man before me, this being of overwhelming love and presence, stood unmoving, yet I felt his presence everywhere. He was in the air, in the light, in the very space that surrounded me. And still, he was right in front of me, watching me with an expression that held both infinite kindness and unwavering authority. I couldn't look away from the marks on his hands. Half moons, glowing softly, identical to the ones imprinted on my own palms. I lifted my hands instinctively, turning them over, my fingers tracing the gentle curve of the light that pulsed just beneath my skin. What did it mean? Why were they there? He stepped forward, closing the distance between us, and in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. I had spent my life searching for something I couldn't name, a quiet longing that had followed me through the years, through the routines, through the moments of solitude where I would stare out my window and wonder if this life, this world, was all there was. And now, standing before him, I knew. I had never been alone. The ache in my chest, the silent longing that had whispered to me in the quietest hours of my life. It had been him all along. "You are here for a reason," he spoke, but his voice was unlike any I had ever heard. It wasn't sound. It was truth, a vibration that resonated in every fiber of my being, carrying with it the weight of eternity. Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from something deeper, from the sheer magnitude of love, from the realization that I had been seen, truly seen, since the beginning. I opened my mouth, the questions flooding my mind. Why me? Why now? What does this mean? But before I could speak, the space around us shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't standing in the glowing expanse anymore. A new vision unfolded before me, stretching out like a living canvas. I saw Earth, but not as I had seen it before. I saw people, their faces both familiar and unfamiliar. I saw their hands. Some bore the same half-moon markings, glowing softly, radiating light with every gesture, every act of kindness, every prayer whispered into the quiet. But others bore dark, fractured marks, jagged and broken, their edges twisting and curling like scars that had never healed. These people walked with a heaviness I recognized, a burden they seemed unaware they were carrying. And beyond them, in the spaces where the light did not reach, I saw shadows. Dark figures, slithering at the edges of the light, watching, waiting. They never touched the people, but they were there, whispering, words I couldn't hear, but somehow understood. Fear. Deception. I turned back to him, my heart pounding. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. His gaze remained steady. "The battle that has always been." I looked back at the vision before me. The world I had lived in, the people I had passed by every day, they had no idea. They had no idea that their choices, their actions, their faith or lack of it, were leaving marks on their very souls. And I understood. The half-moon marks weren't just symbols. They were choices. They were reflections of what we carried within us, of the light we embraced or the darkness we allowed to take root. And just as quickly as the revelation came, the vision began to fade. The light around us dimmed slightly, and I felt a shift, a pull. I wasn't meant to stay here. Not yet. His expression softened, but his next words carried a weight I knew I could never ignore. "You must tell them." I nodded, my heart pounding, the truth of what I had seen settling into my bones. I was being sent back, and nothing would ever be the same. Before we continue, I have something special for you. I want to invite you to be part of this journey, part of this community. If this story has moved you, if something inside you resonates with what you've just heard, then don't just watch. Be a part of it. Like this video to help us reach more people with these incredible messages of faith and hope. And now, I want to hear from you. Tell me your name and the city you're watching from in the comments below. Why? Because in the next video, we'll be choosing names to send a special greeting. Imagine that. Your name called out for thousands of people to hear, a moment just for you. One small way for us to celebrate this community together. And don't go anywhere. At the end of this video, I'll reveal who has been chosen to receive today's special message. Now let's continue. The moment I understood I was being sent back, something within me shifted. It was not fear nor reluctance, but a profound awareness that I was standing on the edge of something greater than myself. I turned to him, my heart pounding in my chest, If I even had a chest here. The weight of his words still echoed through me. You must tell them. A purpose had been set before me. Mission. But how could I possibly explain what I had seen? How could I make them understand the light, the battle, the truth hidden beneath the surface of the world they walk through every day? As if sensing my doubt, he extended his hands, palms up, revealing again the glowing half-moon marks. Their light pulsed in a rhythm that was neither fast nor slow but steady, eternal. I looked down at my own hands. The same half-moon marks. I felt their warmth, their significance, though I still didn't fully understand their purpose. But I knew one thing, they mattered. This is the proof, he said, his voice gentle yet firm. They will know it in their hearts, even if their minds resist. I wanted to ask more. How would I know who to tell? What would I say? Would they even listen? But before I could speak, the world around me began to change. The brilliant celestial light started to retract, pulling away like waves receding from the shore. I felt a sudden tug, gentle, yet impossible to resist. It was as though an unseen force had wrapped around me, guiding me away, back toward a reality I had already begun to forget. I looked at him one last time. His expression was unwavering, filled with a love that transcended anything I had ever known. And then, just before the world faded completely, I heard him say, "You are not alone." Pain slammed into me like a tidal wave. I gasped, my lungs burning, my throat raw. The sound of distant sirens filled my ears, muffled at first, then growing sharper, more real. I was back. The weight of my body crashed down on me all at once, limbs heavy, chest aching, my head throbbing with a dull, relentless pain. The scent of smoke and gasoline still clung to the air. I tried to move. Agony shot through my ribs, forcing me to stay still. Voices hovered around me, urgent yet distant. Blurred figures moved in and out of my vision. Paramedics. One of them leaned over me, his lips moving, but I could barely make out the words. I wasn't afraid. Despite the chaos, despite the pain, there was peace. The kind of peace that didn't come from the absence of suffering, but from the presence of truth. The vision was still fresh in my mind. The half-moon marks, the battle, choice, the command he had given me. And I knew I could never go back to the life I had lived before. The hospital room was dimly lit, the hum of machines filling the silence as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Doctors had called my survival a miracle. By all logic, I should not have made it out of that crash. The wreckage had been catastrophic, metal twisted beyond recognition, the paramedics expecting to recover a body rather than a living, breathing woman. I had broken ribs, deep bruises, and a concussion, but I was alive. More than alive. I had returned with something I hadn't possessed before. Certainty. Mission. For the first few days I said nothing. I let the world think I was just another accident survivor, shaken but grateful. My husband sat by my bedside, holding my hand. His eyes filled with a mixture of relief and worry. My children whispered to each other in the corner, their voices small and uncertain. I watched them, a strange detachment settling over me. I was different. The world outside my hospital window had not changed, but I had. And I had no idea how to explain it. The first person I told was my husband. It was late, the hospital quiet except for the occasional beeping of monitors. He sat beside me, his fingers tracing slow circles over the back of my hand. "I need to tell you something," I whispered. He turned to me, his face weary but attentive. And so I told him. I told him about the accident, the moment the world went dark. I told him about the light, the presence, the marks on my hands. I told him about the vision, the people, the battle, the choice that every single one of us is making, whether we realize it or not. His face was unreadable as I spoke. When I finished, silence stretched between us. Then finally he exhaled. "I believe you." The words were simple, but they cracked something open inside me. I hadn't realized how much I had feared this moment. Feared that he would dismiss it, call it a hallucination, tell me it was just my mind struggling to make sense of trauma. But he didn't. He reached for my hands, his thumbs brushing against my palms, searching for something unseen. "You saw something real," he murmured. "And I think you were sent back for a reason." I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. I wasn't alone in this. And now I had taken the first step. Leaving the hospital should have felt like a return to normalcy. But nothing about my life was normal anymore. The moment I stepped outside, the world seemed sharper, more vivid. The colors of the sky, the way the wind moved through the trees, the laughter of strangers passing by. It all felt alive in a way I had never noticed before. But more than that, I could see. Not with my eyes, but with something deeper. I began noticing things I never had before. The weight in people's shoulders, the hesitation in their voices, the silent battles being fought behind their everyday smiles. It wasn't just a feeling, it was real. I would pass a stranger in the grocery store and feel the grief clinging to them like an unseen shadow. I would sit in a cafe and hear conversations layered with pain they weren't even aware they were carrying. I looked at my own husband, my own children, and saw them with new eyes. Souls wrapped in light and struggle, just like everyone else. And then there were the marks. The half-moon imprints on my hands. They were still there, still glowing faintly when I pressed my fingers together, as if waiting for me to understand their full meaning. I thought about what he had told me. "You must tell them." But how? Who would listen? I wasn't a preacher. I wasn't a scholar. I was just a woman, a mother, a wife, a nurse who had been given a glimpse behind the veil of reality. And yet, I knew I couldn't stay silent. The first time I spoke about it outside my family was at church. I had been attending the same church since childhood. A small community where faces never changed, where people sat in the same pews Sunday after Sunday, comforted by the familiar rhythm of hymns and sermons. That morning, as the service ended and people began filing toward the doors, I felt something stir in me. A quiet but undeniable nudge. "Tell them." I hesitated. The logical part of me screamed, "No, don't. They'll think you're insane." But something greater, something stronger, pushed past the fear. So I stood. People turned, surprised to see me rising from my seat when the service had already ended. The pastor paused mid-conversation, his brow furrowing slightly. Took a breath. "I need to share something." The room fell silent, and so I spoke. I told them about the accident, about the darkness, about the light that had met me on the other side. I told them about the battle, about the unseen war that is waged around us every day. I told them about the half-moon marks, not just on my hands, but on theirs, even if they couldn't see them yet. When I finished, the silence was heavy. Some people stared wide-eyed, as if unsure whether to believe me. Others exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Then, from the back of the room, a single voice broke the silence. An elderly woman, one I had seen every Sunday for years, stood slowly, gripping the back of her pew for support. "I've seen them too," she whispered. A ripple went through the room, and in that moment I knew. I wasn't the only one. There were others. And my mission had only just begun. Before we continue, I want to personally invite you to be part of this community. What we do here isn't about money. We don't make anything from these videos. We do this because we believe in the power of these stories, in the way they can open hearts and change lives. If this journey has touched you in any way, if you felt even the smallest spark of something deeper, please take a moment to subscribe and like this video. Your support isn't just a number. It's what allows us to keep going, to reach more people, to continue sharing these powerful messages of faith and hope. So, if you believe this needs to be heard, click that like button and join us. Now let's continue. The days following my first public testimony felt like stepping into a world both familiar and completely transformed. People began approaching me. At church, at the grocery store, even outside the hospital where I worked. Some were cautious, hesitant, as if afraid of what they might hear. Others were desperate, their eyes wide with an unspoken plea, as though they had been waiting their whole lives for someone to confirm what they had always felt but never understood. Some had seen. They had experienced moments they couldn't explain. Glimpses of light, sensations of warmth when no one was near, dreams so vivid they left them waking with tears in their eyes. And then there were those who hadn't seen, but who longed to believe. I spoke with them, listened to their stories, held their hands as they whispered questions I knew I couldn't fully answer. I told them what I had seen, what I had been shown. The battle is real. The light is real. And so is the choice. Some wept. Others nodded slowly, as if something deep within them had finally clicked into place. And I realized, this was the reason I had been sent back. Not to convince the world with arguments, not to prove anything through logic, but to be a witness, to plant the seeds, to speak the truth so that, when the time was right, hearts would be ready to receive it. One night, long after my children had fallen asleep and my husband's breathing had settled into the steady rhythm of deep slumber, I sat alone on the porch. The stars above were impossibly bright, scattered across the sky like tiny torches burning against the darkness. I looked down at my hands, running my fingers over the spots where the half-moon imprints had first appeared. They were still there, still glowing faintly in the dim light. Reminder. Oh. I closed my eyes and whispered a quiet prayer. Not for miracles, not for signs, but for strength. Strength to keep speaking. Strength to keep walking this path, even when doubt tried to creep in. Strength to remember that even the smallest act of faith could change the course of someone's eternity. And as I whispered that prayer, a warmth filled me once more. The same warmth I had felt in that other place, in the presence of the one who had sent me back. Smiled. I was exactly where I was meant to be. And the journey was only beginning. Before you go, I have something special for you. I want to send a warm, heartfelt greeting to two incredible people who are part of our community. Rebecca from Hanover, Pennsylvania. May your days be filled with light, strength, and the unwavering presence of faith. Never doubt that you are seen, loved, and guided every step of the way. Edward from Cape Town, South Africa. May you continue to walk in the peace and clarity that faith brings. Know that your journey is purposeful, and your light shines brighter than you realize. To everyone else, do you want to hear your name in our next video? Do you want to feel the joy of knowing that thousands of people are hearing your name and sending you love? Then comment below with your name and the city you're watching from. And one last thing. There's another video waiting for you. One that I truly believe will be revealing in your life. Don't miss it. Just click the video appearing on your screen and let it guide you further along this path of faith and discovery. If this message touched your heart, let's spread the light together. Like this video and comment amen below. Let's fill this space with blessings. See you in the next video. God bless you.